happen, and we can think, okay, we could provide this person with a trained dog, trained guided dog, and this would cost $40,000. But we could also think, okay, which other ways we can find to help other people. And if we check their trachoma is a disease that causes blindness. So we can also think that we can invest $40 and cure one person from blindness. So therefore, this would be a very simple approach, and we can generate the biggest impact with more to more people. But of course, money is not the only way. Many students have to say, okay, what happens if you don't have money, if you don't have an income? How can I help if money is not being chosen? And yes, effective altruism is not all about charities. It's not about money. It's also about time. And so, but how can we help with our time? One way would be with career choices. So effective altruists discuss continuously ways of helping the world. And choosing a good career oriented to help the world is a good choice. And actually, there are many opportunities given in effective altruism, and there are many things that we could learn. Now, Soren will travel for a fellowship for 3 months to California, and so it is a nice and interesting opportunity. And actually, in the next period, in August, we will be giving some lectures and some orientations in career-related matters. You can find more information in 80,000 hours. And also, well, spreading the word is the other form of without money using effectively. So we are encouraging people, if any one of you would like to come later and join us, perhaps organizing lectures with ideas, you're more than welcome, because many of us are living, for instance, and we need some other people. And, well, we will have, after this, for more information, there will be a newsletter that you can sign up. And after this, we will have a short Q&A, and then we'll have with Alan, and then we'll have drinks, and you can also come to me or come to any of us for questions or suggestions or anything that you would like to know more on EA. So now please welcome Alan.
Good. Well, I think I was an effective altruismist before anyone invented effective altruism, because I worked in Africa for 35 years on tropical diseases. Tropical diseases which affected the poorest of the poor. I was lucky enough to be employed by the British government as part of their aid program, and then the American government as part of their aid program in Egypt. And in the year 2000, I had finished the program in Egypt and left Egypt with the situation of not having schistosomiasis as a public health problem. Now, one of the big things was, what would I do then? And I was very fortunate that Bill Gates had just made his huge fortune and decided that he would form a foundation. And he put the sum of $20 billion of his own money, it's nice to have a little bit of your own money to invest, into his foundation. And because of the laws in America, if you form a foundation, it cannot be an avoidance of tax, so you have to use it. And so the laws in America say that you have to give away 5% of the value of your foundation. 5% of $20 billion is $1 billion, and giving away $1 billion is quite difficult if you have to do it quickly. So I went to see him, and I explained to him that his first grants were for childhood vaccinations, for malaria, and for HIV. And I said to him, do you know that there are 10 times as many people in Africa with schistosomiasis as there are with HIV? Of course, not only did he not know that, but he didn't know what schistosomiasis was either. And I'm assuming that probably you don't. Does anyone here know what is schistosomiasis? Okay, so I started an organization called the Schistosomiasis Control Initiative, which was the stupidest name I have ever thought of, because nobody knows what we do. But in 45 minutes' time, you will be world experts on schistosomiasis. So, here's a little effective altruism starter. 1 billion people, 1 in 6 of the human population live on less than £1 or $2 a day. So poverty is 1 in 6 of the human population. And of course, one of the consequences of not having any money is that you get sick. And if you get sick, you don't have the money to buy the medicines to make you better. And then, if you're sick, you can't go to work, so you become poor. And it's a cycle of poverty and illness. Now, one of the groups of diseases that people can get are parasites. And that is what I am particularly passionate about. And I'm going to convince you today that the parasitic diseases in Africa are a massive problem. They are a problem that effective altruists can do something about, very inexpensively. And if we can eliminate these parasites, then we will have improved the health of almost, well, 1 in 6 of the human population. So here are a list of the parasites, and the reason that I am a professor is because I can spell them, I can pronounce them, and I know their life cycles. I have divided them into black and red text, and I've divided them into 3 groups. The protozoan infections are very tiny creatures. They cause, again, unpronounceable names. Human African trypanosomiasis is sleeping sickness, which you may have heard of, and the other 2 are similar organisms that live in the blood and cause very nasty diseases. I'm not going to talk about those today. I would need 4 hours and you'd all be asleep long before I reached the conclusion. The bacterial infections, I'm sure that you've heard of leprosy, but there are 2 other very important bacteria, Borreliosa, which actually is quite rare now, and trachoma, which Luciana mentioned because it causes blindness. And then there are helminth infections. They are worms. And all except one of them is in red, and trachoma is in red. And the reason these 7 diseases are in red is because we have drugs which can either cure or eliminate these 7 diseases. They are safe drugs, and they only have to be given once a year to people who are infected. And the other thing about all these neglected tropical diseases is that they infect the poorest of the poor and inflict horrible consequences. They're not malaria, they're not HIV, and they're not TB. 20 years ago, those 3 were neglected tropical diseases, but they're not neglected anymore. There is so much money pouring into the control of malaria and TB and HIV. Can I just ask, am I speaking at a fair speed for you all? I know English isn't your first language. It's okay. So, what I'm going to do, what I would like to do if I had time was to give you the life cycles of them all and a little bit about all the diseases. But in the interest of time, I'm going to concentrate just on soil-transmitted helminths, 3 worms, and of course on Schistosomiasis. And then we'll see how I get on for time and how interested you are. If you're interested, you can ask about the other ones on that. So we have 3 intestinal worms. Now these worms don't live in the human body. The human body is a cylinder with a hole in the middle, which starts here and ends down here. And these worms live inside that hole. They live in the gut. So we can get rid of them. We can wash them out. So the 3 main worms are called Ascariasis, Trichuriasis, and hookworm. And as you can see, there's almost 2 billion if you add them up. So almost everybody who is in that poverty line has one or other of these worms. Now, some people only have a few worms, and then it doesn't particularly do them much harm. But some children particularly, because of their poor hygiene and what they eat, can pick up a lot of worms. And there is an example there of a little girl who has a belly full of ascaris. We can treat ascaris with a tablet of albendazole. And when I started SCI, I was buying albendazole for 1 penny or 2 cents per tablet from a generic manufacturer in India. Do any of you own cats and dogs? Do you own pets? Even if you don't, I'm sure you know people who do. And they will deworm their pets, probably every month. They probably will spend the equivalent of $20 every year to deworm their pets. It's the same drug that I buy for 2 cents in India. People spend a lot more money in the West on the pets than we spend on deworming children. So I've made use of that. And we've gone to the manufacturers, to the pharmaceutical industries, and said, look how much money, I know how much money you're making from selling your drugs to the pets. Give it to me free so that I can deworm children in Africa. And if I did, if we gave that little girl 1 tablet of a miracle drug called albendazole, these were the worms that came out of her. Now it's absolutely impossible for her to get any nutrition, because as soon as she eats any food, these worms gobble it up. And so one of the obvious consequences of people having these worms, and remember the number of people, it's 800 million in the world, have some of these worms, although possibly not as many as that. And therefore, they're already poor, they don't have much food, and they're feeding worms and not their children. So, worms cause stunting and malnutrition, which in turn means that children are either too tired to go to school, too weak to go to school, or if they go to school, they then fall asleep and they don't learn. And so their school performance is very adversely affected. And if they don't have a good education, then the chances of them having a good job later in life is also reduced. There is a great feeling in the West that African children are lazy. And what I'm saying is there's a very good reason. It's not their fault. It's because they're infected with these worms. And if I can collect enough pennies, we can treat these children. Let me ask you a question. How many, and I'll get you to put your hands up, how many children were treated this year free of charge against worms? Was it less than 20 million? Was it less than 50 million? You think it was less? Was it less than 100 million? Was it less than 200 million? You're nowhere near. 600 million children this year were given free deworming pills that was donated by the pharmaceutical industry. So we've moved a long way. In the year 2000, not a single individual in sub-Saharan Africa was being treated for worms, schistosomiasis, trachoma, and the others. Today, counting the other diseases as well as worms, over 700 million people receive free treatment for these neglected tropical diseases every year. I'm going to move to schistosomiasis, and this is the moment you've all excitedly been waiting for, because you're going to learn what it is. Two worms, a male and a female. You can tell which is the female. It's the sort of skinny one. The male is the big, strong one. And they live together. The male carries the female, and they're about 1 centimetre in length. And they live in the blood of the human host. This is the picture I want. Parasites have a life cycle. So if you have schistosomiasis, no matter how friendly you are with the young man sitting next to you, you can't give him your disease. Schistosome worms lay eggs, and the eggs are in the blood vessels, and yet for the schistosome to develop, the eggs have to get into water, hatch, and attack a snail. And then they take over the snail's body. So the parasites are parasites of people and parasites of snails. And then the next larva leaves the snail, and it can penetrate unbroken skin and infect a human being. Now in the UK, we don't have this disease, nor do we have it here. It's a tropical disease, and the temperature needs to be at least 20 to 25 degrees centigrade for the development to take place in the snail. Also, because it's so cold where we live, people don't go in the water like that nearly as much. So even if there was an infection in the water, they would not get infected. Why else is there no schistosomiasis in the developed world? Because we have sanitation. So when people go to the bathroom, go to the toilet, to urinate and defecate, everything is treated. These worms that have laid the eggs, and I had a picture of the eggs before, there they are, they're in the blood vessel, and they've got to get out of the human body. So in the capillary tubes, the small blood vessels, with this horrible spine here, they burst them open, and the eggs get into the bladder or into the intestine, and of course they take blood with them. And then the next time the person urinates or defecates, these eggs go and leave the human body. In Africa, people tend to urinate and defecate near fresh water, and then the eggs will hatch and infect snails. So